Introduce our speaker for the day. So those of you can be reminded who are on the steering committee, our next meeting is this Friday, November 7th, from 1 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. We'll be considering the small grant proposals at that time. We have fewer small grant proposals than usual this year, which means we hopefully will have extra money left over for spring grant applications. We should have more than we usually do. So if you're thinking of proposing a grant in the spring, know that that might be a very good time to do so when it isn't always really good in the springtime. So we should have the funds. The newsletter has a deadline of November 15th, right, Artie? So if you have something to submit to the newsletter, take a look at the rules online and submit them to Artie Nelson, who will be publishing that in December, I think. Is that when it comes out? Late November, early December, okay. Our next talk will be December 4th. Ken Rinaldo from the art department will be talking about artificial intelligence and art and algorithmic species is arising. That might be very interesting. Today's talk is being given by Dr. Sabra Weber. Dr. Weber has been a professor emerita in the Emeritus Academy at OSU since the fall of 2017. She's been a professor for 40 years at OSU, where she held a joint appointment in comparative studies and Near Eastern languages and cultures. She served as chair of comparative studies for 6 years and acting chair of the NELC for 2 years. She holds a BA in English Literature from Occidental College, MA in Folklore from UC Berkeley, and a PhD in Cultural Anthropology and Folklore from the University of Texas at Austin. Post her BA, she actually served 3 years in the Peace Corps in Tunisia and North Africa, teaching kindergarten, and in summers traveling the country recording children's rhymes, rhyming games, and lullabies that were published in Tunisia in Tunisian Arabic. She's been a grateful recipient of multiple fellowships, among them an NEH, SSRC, a Rockefeller, Senior Fulbright Scholarship, and a research grant from the British Academy. And today she's going to talk to us with a talk that's title is Spectacular Descent, Colin Kaepernick Takes a Knee. Dr. Weber.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. And I have to say, speaking of talks, that being a member of this academy has allowed me to conveniently and collegially sample lectures from disciplines far from outside my purview. So thank you, whoever invented the academy here at Ohio State. I'm talking today about sports and civil disobedience in America in the context of game day culture and the pushback against racism by elite athletes. If you are interested in a more detailed version, I can email a pre-publication chapter that I wrote for a volume on folklore and performance due out in a month. After writing the whole chapter, it seems like I'm saying very little now in this talk. The core of this discussion is the detailing unpacking of 2 improvised tableaux that have become iconic for their ability to be heard beyond the razzle-dazzle of stadium modalities of big money game days. In 1968 and again in 2016, thousands of privileged attendees and global television viewers were shaken, not all unwillingly, by elite players' design plays that dramatically challenged a game day's anticipated script. Thousands or millions of spectators are reminded of what it is to live as lesser in a land that promises. I'm thinking about the election that promises freedom and justice for all. I do remember that when I first watched Dave Chappelle performing his humorous accounts of police malfeasance against Black Americans in 2000. He uses his white guy voice to report to his wife the surprising fact that, according to Newsweek, apparently police have been beating up Negroes like hotcakes. He then goes on to give several exaggerated examples of why Black folk don't call, are afraid of the police. 15 years later, writer Matthew Love notes in Rolling Stone magazine that due to the burgeoning of cell phone video, police body cameras, and proliferation of social media, some of Chappelle's darkly humorous accounts of police brutality against Black citizens sadly turned out to be far from exaggerations. Witnessing cold-blooded murder on camera makes it hard to look away from treatment of Black lives as expendable, or for corrupt police and self-nominated vigilantes to conceal their crimes. Do you recognize this picture? I guess some people, yeah, since we're retired, I remember it too. I was actually in North Africa watching the Olympics with a family because Gamoudi was a runner for Tunisia. Despite long struggles on streets and in courtrooms, achieving social justice for all Americans in law or in practice was and is failing. In the 20th century, individual elite athletes have taken part in protesting this status quo. But the famous winner's podium resistance tableau, designed by runners John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, was the only game day display to spark pushback on progress in race relations until Kaepernick first took a knee. When consistent visual proof of police malfeasance and vigilante justice were over 40 years in the future, how were elite track stars Tommy Smith and John Carlos, students at San Jose State College in California, able to carry out their legendary, similarly global, impactful example of game day spectacular descent? Like other elite athletes on college campuses, Smith and Carlos were anticipating the summer of Olympics in Mexico City or considering boycotting the Olympics. What led up to this Olympic tableau wherein Smith Carlos and Australian Peter Norman end up on the winners' risers, Tommy and John with fists raised in the Black Power salute for all the world to see. Does anyone know what happened to Peter Norman? Well, Peter Norman had the worst. He helped them prepare their tableau, actively engaged in their project. And he got back to Australia and he was never allowed to play for Australia again. Australia, as I didn't know until recently, had a whites-only policy in terms of immigration. And until almost now, they've had that. But I think it was in the early, maybe 2000 something anyway, Australia finally apologized to Norman for what they did to him. Context is important. Just 2 years ago in 1966 in Oakland, California, less than an hour's drive from San Jose, the Black Panthers Party was formed. Then the year leading up to the '68 Olympics had been fraught for Black communities. In the midst of Vietnam protests, Muhammad Ali was banned from boxing for 3 years for refusing military conscription. Apartheid nations continued to be allowed to participate in the Olympics, and the dunk, then Black players' specialty, was banned in college basketball as showboating. Tragically, that spring, the Reverend Martin Luther King was murdered. And days before the Olympics began, Mexican students protesting their government's choice to fund the Olympics rather than fund social programs were surrounded by the Army and fired upon. Over 200 students were killed and hundreds were injured. In that pre-Olympics atmosphere, Smith and Carlos, student track sensations at San Jose State, had discussed with other Black athletes and Black community on and off campus the idea of boycotting the Olympics, due especially to the admittance of apartheid nation's athletes and the murders of the Mexican students. Some did boycott, including the already famous basketball star, Alcindor. I guess you know that's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar now. He did boycott and banning the dunk went on in college for about 10 years. It was considered the Alcindor ban, yeah. And most people thought it was a racist move because Black students as youths had perfected that dunk. Yeah, so instead, Carlos and Smith decided to compete and have a say should they win medals. They did win. Smith won gold and Carlos won bronze at the 200 meter, and a white Australian, as I said, Peter Norman, won silver. But rather than seeming human props to celebrate American excellence, the Americans performed for the watching world American failures, standing with heads bowed, shoeless, each silently raising a black-gloved hand in the Black Power salute. As the anthem rose, they reversed the message of flag and song, podium, and athletes from celebratory to accusatory. Through slight adjustments to proper podium stance and dress, the familiar winner's simple ritual was made uncomfortably strange. They flipped the script by its new associations. Flag and song instantly recurated from emblems of unity to disunity and reminders of American freedom and justice for all promised, but not delivered. That visual narrative in its context was startling, yet for Black American communities at the least, surely it was quickly read as a narrative variant, one always already recognized. Smith and Carlos had found a means to share their affecting message within the cacophonous moments of the Olympic Games. Their recourse to the noise challenge was to perform a visual story that was strikingly contrasted in mode and message from the expected game day celebration. As Smith observed, we had to be seen because we couldn't be heard. His comment was triply meaningful. They had to be seen because they couldn't be heard in the stadium on the podium, in the resistance to apartheid, or back home where justice for all was not working for Black or working class citizens. And I should say that that Carlos was more attuned to protesting all blue collar type workers, and he wore a black shirt under his jacket. Not turning my pages fast enough. Turning to events leading up to the second spectacular descent among elite athletes and the consequences of these descent's actions. We are all familiar with Colin Kaepernick's road to supporting Black Lives Matter. New media by 1916 had already made spectacularly clear the continuing of police brutality and vigilante justice against unarmed Black men and women by police. By that time, the Black Lives Matter movement was 3 years old. The first sports teams to respond to Black Lives Matter were often, even before 2013, elite members of the Women's National Basketball Association. The Minnesota Lynx, for example, in the summer of 2016, just a month or so previous to Kaepernick's kneel, named Slade, Philando Castile, and Alton Sterling on their warm-up shirts, along with the phrases, Change starts with us, justice and accountability, and on the back, the names of Sterling and Castile, along with the Dallas Police Department emblem and the phrase Black Lives Matter. In response, 4 policemen who had been hired to guard the women during the game walked off the job, and the company that produced their uniforms fined them for altering the uniforms. Post-Neil women's teams reverted to taking a knee together as teams. Men's NBA team members like LeBron James and other elite players wore shirts emblazoned with, at different times, referring to different slayings, "I can't breathe," or "hands up, don't shoot," as the murders went on. A month and a half after the Lynx protest, on September 1st, 2016, 49ers quarterback Colin Rand Kaepernick took a knee before 70,000 spectators, exuberantly awaiting the start of a preseason game against the San Diego Chargers. And so you can tell from, you know how many military bases there are in San Diego. There are a lot. So you can, I don't know if you planned it that way, but it was pretty contrasted. Instead of standing under the American flag, hand over heart, Kaepernick knelt to the earth beneath the flag as the national anthem was sung. News of his small folk tableau, a performative call to action against police brutality, sparked a contentious conversation that has resonated globally. The quote under the slide, his jersey said San Francisco, but his hair screamed Oakland. It's funny if you're from the San Francisco Bay Area because it's a contrast between San Francisco and Oakland, where the Black Panthers started. A month and a half after the Lynx protest on September 1st, 2016, I'm reading the same thing over again. Colin Rand Kaepernick was born on November 3rd, 1987. At Turlock High School in California, he was all-state in baseball, basketball, and football. He chose to play football at the University of Nevada. He finished college having passed for over 10,000 yards, almost 6 miles, and rushed for over 4,000 yards, a feat that has not been duplicated in his division. He maintained a 4.0 GPA. He then played for 6 seasons with the 49ers. In 4 of those seasons, he set 1 or more records. In his last season, 2016, coming back after 3 surgeries, he joined only 4 other NFL players in history to record at least 3 passing touchdowns and 100 yards rushing in a game. However, since the Neil controversy, as I'm sure you know, he has not been hired by another team. Blackballed, many players and fans assert, by the NFL. My approach to studying the 2 tableaux focuses on the performances, in particular folk or grassroots, communally improvised performances, folk performance, that occur in the context of big money sports on game day. My chapter briefly considers other reasons it's important for performance and folklore studies to focus more attention on the aesthetics of sport. I really think we should be sending sports teams overseas to play with others, with friendly games with other sports teams. We need to get more people out of this country and visiting other countries. And that way we could teach a course. We could teach a course and then on a certain country, and then they could go and meet players in that country, and also at the same time travel around the country, meet people, and maybe become interested in learning a language. In this regard, I've listed some useful terms. So performance studies includes both games and sports, as foci of study, and the originating kernel of the field to be performance. distinct, rehearsed, and staged as the tableau are. I should say I'm mentioning this because people are so unused to studying sports in this context that one of the editors of the volume, or I have my chapter, could not understand why I was talking about this tableau situation in the context of either folklore, and the person was a folklorist, or performance. So I had to, defend things I didn't think I would have to defend. Folklore as a discipline defined folklore as structures of feeling or poeticizing touch, communally negotiated, attend to the artfulness dimension of sport. Other terms I use that focus on visual modalities are bricolage and assemblage, both relevant to folk community practice and the incorporation of found objects, such as the flag and national anthem, into the actions of both Kaepernick today and Smith and Carlos in 1968. The term roguish utterances here is used by linguistic anthropologist Irving Goffman in the 1980s. And it came in handy when I was trying to figure out the aggravated, somehow off-kilter responses to the kneel from public figures. Also, I had to defend in terms of both folklore and performance studies, the idea that narrative is not the same as language, that you don't have to have obviously a play that has words, or, or a folk story that's told verbally. So you can read, I think you can all read that. Should I? Yeah, you think? Okay. I also consider the importance of self-possessed red roots visual narrative or body language on game days. I say body language, so much of sports that you're watching, or if obviously athletes are performers, right? From the beginning, they're already performers by the time they get to that elite level. And most of the performances that they do are on the fields or the court or wherever have to not be verbal, right? They're different kinds of movements. And if I had more time, I could give some examples. But the verbal responses often carry the overheated verbal responses that we see with the two tableaus often carry politically elitist and racist tinges. The contrast between the raucous stadiums, tracks, or courts, the out-of-control reactions of spectators to the tableaus, and the quiet bodies of athletes compared to their strong and animated bodies in play I think is important. I also put for folklore the emphasis on affect as well. And Alan Dundes is my old first professor in folklore at Berkeley. We're all the folk, right? That was, I got some pushback on that. Then folklore defined as old customs and feelings, and Martha Beck, the first professor of folklore in 1931. Folklore is emotional coloring. It functions in the emotional life of the folk, who are all of us. Okay. What they're up against. Oh, I put this slide of the women's NBA because this is a scene you see over and over again. As I said, all of the women kneeling, black and white and brown, together in a line before games, during the national anthem. So that's something that they've kind of taken as their their performance. Kaepernick's kneel, like the Black Power salute, threw off an American sports game plan organized to be innocent of political or social tensions that would contradict the ideal grand narrative of communitas. So you have what you all know is if you go to any kinds of games, not just elite games, highly emotionally charged, noisy, raucous, multiple performative, animated, active, combative. And then I also put patriotic, militaristic, because in case you hadn't known this, surprisingly, Flake and John McCain, both Republicans, wrote a report on paying for military appreciation during football games. They revealed, it says there too, between 2012 and 2015, the Defense Department paid 6.8 million of taxpayers' money to professional and college sporting organizations to use big sports events for military moments aimed at recruitment. They, you know, and especially McCain, and remembering his time spent in captivity and so forth, they really did not like that idea at all, that militaristic idea of using taxpayer money to, as ads, sort of for joining the military. Okay. So and what are they up against? I mentioned so many, there's more things to think about, there's more things to think about in terms of the interaction between the players and the owners and managers of football or any big game. The hiring of professional planners, the top-down meticulous planning, you'll hear more about that. Top-down control by owners or managers, heavily invested financially or emotionally in their ideal of a sports setting. And the whole idea of politics free, I mean, I think already anyone can see that neither the Olympics nor sports are politics free, right? It's just who gets to have the politics. And so then, as I sort of run through the aesthetically innovative, I'll use the dunk again as an example, but there's many more. Physically artistic, challenging, grassroots communal, the players working together for on and off the field. Surprise, tradition, and the old way that celebrations at festivals used to be a tolerated margin of mess. It's not meant to be totally controlled, and there's reasons why that margin of mess is there. Okay. Memories of youth sports, or of sitting with one's family looking out over green fields, an ice rink, tennis courts or basketball courts, eating hot dogs or Cracker Jack or ice cream, and experiencing the excitement of the day, are tied to introducing a new generation to weekend escapes into a semi-public venue of innocence and purity, an almost hallowed timeout in which to eat, drink, cheer, and relax. A lot of movies come to mind thinking about or movies that have sports nostalgia in them. But we're warned by Miriam Tickton about celebrating spaces of innocence. She lays out the human consequences of erasing recognition of poverty, class, religious hypocrisy, racism, or sexism within a communal venue. When game day professional planners achieve an innocent space, unsullied, she writes, by knowledge or politics, it institutes a pathetic, docile figure at the heart of this space. She adds the centrality of innocence to the political imagination, renders invisible the structural and historical causes of inequality. We need to open up political, moral, and affective, my emphasis, grammars beyond innocence. In the context of big money American sports, this observation recalls the critique of passive spectatorship. Writes Mary Douglas, purity is the enemy of change, or ambiguity and compromise. When spectacular dissent performances abruptly break through the imposed silence on politics using performed silence in a noisy stadium, some spectators' complacency is jolted by the disagreeable reminder of American failures to ensure justice for all. The subaltern on game day is not only speaking out on racism, but is doing so taking center stage before thousands of spectators, often with the approval of elite players. Are you going to play that? Or Michael?
Colin Kaepernick, and I know, Troy, talking to you, this is the great unknown coming into this game. They had Alex Smith at quarterback playing well. He took him to the champ game last year. Now it's the second-year quarterback. Big weapon back for the Packers. On 3rd down and 10, Kaepernick has to scramble, now floats. He's got Gore. Gore is down inside the 30 and knocked down inside the 25. Kaepernick steps up, will try and run to pick it up. He's got a touchdown. Got to get it into the end zone. That's Crabtree, and he does. And 49ers 5 for 7 on 3rd down. Kaepernick makes it 6 for 8. Kaepernick, Crabtree for the touchdown. Blitz coming. 49ers try and pick it up, and there's Kaepernick again. 2nd down and 4. Kaepernick keeps it. Fooled everybody. Colin Kaepernick. What a game. Touchdown. 2nd down and 9. Pump fake. Davis. What a throw. 1st down at the 15. Colin Kaepernick, who was born in Milwaukee, grew up a Packers fan, has just broken the heart of the Green Bay Packers and their fans here tonight.
Certainly the fact that elite athletes are already performers and bricoleurs on the field. Witness Kaepernick fooling everybody in the video we watched. Perhaps more pertinent, the dunk of Alcindor aids in the effectiveness of the game day off-field social justice displays. The example of Alcindor's basketball dunk can suffice for both for his development of dunking skill, which was nurtured among early street play with mostly Black youths, to performance innovation on the court by Black men. In many spectators' opinions, led to the manager's owner's decision that the dunk was showboating and should be banned from college basketball. The understanding of silence as power, as a tactic. I have this impulse to always try to mix up different genres when I'm talking about performance or affect or poetic sorts of considerations because I think sports tends to be left out of that kind of approach, and So I learned a lot. A lot of the theory that I'm using does not at all come from sports, right? Okay. So, what time is it? Am I running out of time? No, I'm okay. So the idea of the folk community is this, Whalen says this, you start out playing for people who are just like you. And it could be playing football, it could be playing a guitar. That you play for people who come from where you come from. They understand what you're doing, so you feel like you're doing it for them. Then one day, you are not playing for people like you anymore. And there's a lot of truth in that too, when you look at the tension between the players and the owners of the teams or the managers. The players do crazy things when they're playing. The managers or the owners don't want their player to get hurt. They don't, that's some money, that player. And then the NFL, you've probably heard, or you may have heard, is sometimes referred to as the no fun league, because, they ban demonstrations once you make a touchdown or some kind of, there's penalties for all of that. And I have pictures of those too, but can't show all that. Okay. Understanding the power of silence is a tactic not limited, of course, to game day displays, nor is silence as resistance limited to folklore and performance studies. Law professor Dorothy Roberts notes that silence can be deployed by dominant or subordinate groups. She posits that dominant groups, quote, misinterpret the silences of subordinated people. I suggest that in the case of the resistances discussed here, where silence lends power in a space where noise typically reigns, certain dominant groups who cannot look away conveniently misinterpret performers' intent. Unable to or refusing to engage with the complexities of the small performances or the severity of the Black Lives Matter crisis. Roberts continues, silence is not just the absence of voice. Silence is an interactive process that responds to the conduct of other human beings. In fact, some spectators' hysterical verbal and physical responses served in marked contrast to the disciplined podium and kneel tableau. The role of reflexivity in performance aesthetics underscores the slippery slope between spectator and participant, whereby some spectators, by choice or chance, become actors once they, speak up, yell up, throw things. So you have, I guess you all remember these, wouldn't you love to see these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get blah, blah, blah. So, and also, so by that move, by where Trump decides to be an actor, the protests became widespread when over 200 players sat or knelt in response to his calls for owners to fire the protesting players. And I think the slide might be cut off, but Kaepernick's mother said the next day, or the same day, I guess, with Trump's statement, he ignited one tiny ember into a forest fire. And that's what he did. I mean, maybe if people hadn't felt that they wanted to have a say in all this, they wanted the center stage that the performers were taking, that the athletes were taking, the big flare up in terms of in terms of the kneel in this case, might never have happened. No, but certain people decided to take the stage. So you also have a month later, after Trump's outcry, Houston Texans owner Bob McNair saying we can't have the inmates running the prison. And that's not the right, it's supposed to be, we can't have the inmates running the asylum. And so right there, you can see, I think, to some extent, how McNair thinks about his players. And there was a player who'd since been promoted to management. And he stood up at the table when Bob McNair said that, and he said, I've been called everything since I've been in this sport, including the N-word, but nobody's ever called me a prisoner. And then in Laura Ingraham, and I really think Laura Ingraham, she, I don't watch her, I've only watched her once, I think, but she reacted to a CNN interview with basketball elites LeBron James and Kevin Durant. LeBron James was a huge supporter of Kaepernick, as I guess you know. And so LeBron in this interview defended Kaepernick and criticized Trump. And then she said to the folk hero, hometown folk hero LeBron, that it's always unwise to seek political advice from someone who gets paid $100,000 million a year to bounce a ball. Keep the political comments to yourself. Shut up and dribble. Okay. So in response to those responses and the backlashes, I borrow and adapt Irving Goffman's 1978 consideration of emotive cries. He writes of these cries as some roguish utterances that appear to violate interactional independence, entering the stream of behavior as peculiar and unnatural places, producing communicative effects but no dialogue. He suggests that what appears to be blurted out in the spur of the moment is not necessarily so uncontrolled. The pretend blurter even being prepared, if challenged, to reel back on the blurt with some excuse or claim to have been misunderstood. Oh, and as I said, McNair later claimed he was not referring to the players as prisoners. But these three examples are spoken by people considered and considering themselves consequential enough to be widely heard, and each throws out a catchphrase designed to cleverly and performatively explain why Black professional athletes are unqualified to occupy game day center stage in support of marginalized citizens. And further, that they're somehow unqualified to interpret their own actions. They can say several times about that the reason why they're doing the kneel or doing the Black Power salute, but they aren't allowed to say why they're doing it. Other people have to say around them what they're doing it, disrespecting the flag. Okay, and considering those, this has kept, this kind of emotional response has kept Kaepernick's kneel been one reason it's been kept relevant, and even grown in effectiveness for at least that reason and a couple of other reasons. Another outburst example, the younger sports players caught on to, through social media, they caught on to the kneel. And these are Norman High School girls basketball kneeling during the national anthem. Again, the team knelt together after talking with each other about it before a playoff game. The announcer cursed and used a slur as students knelt during the national anthem. It was before a high school tournament game in Oklahoma. He later apologized and blamed his diabetes for the outburst. I guess, I guess he takes you different ways. And then the tweet was, looks like you forgot to cut the mic. F word, N word is the one that really got me. Tell us how you really feel. This is why they kneel. So, and then also, in conversations about, I think I got these mixed up. Okay, in conversations about going to the White House, both basketball and football are invited to go to the White House if they win the national championship. Well, I remember it was the Warriors, and when Trump was president, and he met for basketball, and LeBron James writes, "You bum," about to our president. Already said he ain't going, so therefore ain't no invite. This is how LeBron switches back and forth between like slangy talk and proper talk. Going to the White House was a great honor until you showed up. And then Jack Tapper, who's a well-known commenter, said Trump is focusing like a laser on the major problems of the American people. Black professional athletes with opinions. Okay, I'm going to stop pretty soon because I'm talking too much to you guys and not reading my stuff here. But I just wanted to talk about one more. Malcolm Jenkins. You know who Malcolm Jenkins is? He played for OSU. Okay, so he did this really. I was looking around for reasons to keep the not become the nil to not become ho hum, or to not be these issues to not be sort of seen and gone on with. And so one of the things that he did is after a game, he had big pieces of white paper like that. And and then he had lots of other pieces of white paper. And what he did was he had this short performance for reporters where when everyone was wondering, were the Eagles going to go? Were they going to accept Trump's invitation? And Jenkins' whole thing that it was only like about a 2-minute little snip of a video, but it's just so painful to watch because the reporters just don't get it. They keep trying to ask him about going to the White House, and he said, you don't get it. And one by one, he'd hold up that sign, and then one by one, he'd hold up other signs indicating systemic disparities and inequities disproportionately hurting communities of color. He noted athlete activist donations of time and money to support relevant hometown projects. And then every time the confused reporters did not get it, he just silently, without saying anything, he didn't speak for the whole interview. I guess, I don't know if they ever got it, but anyway. So I have other things to say, but if I would love to hear some comments from you guys, and also, as I said, I can send you the chapter if you want, so you don't have to keep listening to me for the whole time. Is that okay?
So we have time for questions. And if you have one, just raise your hand and I'll come to you with a microphone. Comments, ma'am?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Sabra. This is, I think, a very timely and thought-provoking comment, and I'm glad that your final slide was of Naomi Osaka, because I think tennis players actually represent a kind of globalized arena for protest. And I wanted to kind of push you to globalizing these comments. You've been focusing on protests in connection with the Black Lives Matter movement, and much earlier with the Black Power movement. That was at the Olympics, of course, which was a global event. what I think of when I think of athletes protesting, since I follow professional tennis, is things like Ukrainian tennis players refusing to shake hands at the net with Russian and Belarusian players, and they tell their opponents in advance that they won't be shaking hands, that kind of thing, or wearing, in the case of Iga Świątek, the Polish player, wearing a yellow and blue ribbon on her baseball cap. In addition to that, you mentioned the 1968 famous Olympic protest, and then you cite Kaepernick as the next big protest. Surely there were sports protests in between on various issues, for example, against apartheid and that kind of thing. Not that you should catalog every single sports protest.
Very not remembered. I know several that happened for one reason or another, usually by only one person, usually not a communal type agreement to protest, but someone who tried to do it on his or her own. Actually, in the last Olympic, but the thing that I like about it is also, you just made me think, is that what happened in these cases has spread all over the world. And other people in other countries are imitating those things or building on them in one way or another. So in the last Olympics, it was Peru, Japan, England, Sweden, the British, of course. All of them were taking a knee. The soccer players were taking a knee, and they weren't taking a knee for a different reason. They had the same problems in their part of the world as well. And and I don't just guess, it's obvious. But the thing you mentioned about the British have really picked up on it, and they're doing, I guess some people know this, they have certain soccer matches where they kneel, they plan to do it all together. They voted on it before and the one right after after COVID, when they finally got back to playing, they all had Black Lives Matter on their shirts. So, but the British have it. I think soccer players in Britain are a little they're not good. They're rowdy. They're really rowdy. They don't have that same idea of the families going to the game together, kind of that at least I had growing up with baseball. But they went, but now more people, they said a lot more people are clapping when they do it than booing. But when they went to Hungary, first they went to play some friendly game, I guess, with Hungary, soccer game. And all the Hungarians in the stands were booing the kneel. Without exception, I guess, and throwing things, bottles and cans and whatever. And so they all were banned from going to the games for a certain number of games. But they let the kids come. But then the kids started doing the same thing. So, I think it's important to know. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for your comments. That'll be helpful.
And speaking of global, who can forget the tableau of the single Chinese citizen standing in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square? That would be a tableau also, I would think. He wasn't an athlete, yes, but a tableau.
Well, talk about art things. The Oakland Museum just had a huge exhibit that was by an artist in Japanese, German artist. His name I can't remember. And it was all about the Kaepernick kneel, and
Yeah.
So.
Any other questions or comments?
You didn't mention Wilt Chamberlain, and he dominated the game of basketball so thoroughly that they actually changed the physical dimensions of the court to stop Wilt from doing what he did. It used to look like, I look around this room and many of you are in my age demographic, it used to look like a keyhole, like when we were kids, they had that little key you stuck in. But now it looks like a bullet, and he dominated the game so thoroughly. I think that he scored 50 points in 125 games, and the closest to him now is 30. and that was like LeBron James or someone, but it was aimed at stopping this black man from achieving as well as he did. That was all. So
Yeah, and was that considered a racist move? I suppose it was, huh?
Yeah.
Not at the time, did you say? Okay, well, the thing with, here's the person over here. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Sabra.
Oh,
And we've talked about this a little, but maybe this is more a comment than a question. I don't know. Both the raise fist and the kneel are performative gestures that have long historical context, certainly within American
Sure.
slavery and resistance, but they're very different gestures. And I wonder if you could talk a little about sort of the context of the kneel. I'd also ask you to talk a little, because I learned this fairly recently. Kaepernick was not able to continue his quarterback career, but he has had an alternate, in a sense, career and circulates as a kind of powerful icon,
sure.
certainly among African American students in various books,
Oh,
et cetera.
sure. And I think that, I think that's one thing that Trump, to begin with, didn't understand, is that he wanted to play a sport. He sacrificed his sport. Because Trump said, well, you make so much money, go do something else. But I mean, he ever since he was a little kid, that's what he wanted to do. And the other thing, before the Neil thing is really interesting because, for one thing, right in front of your very eyes, if someone gets hurt on a football field, for example, you usually take off your helmet and you kneel. You take a knee. So it's not an unusual thing to take a knee. It's just what it was taken for. Again, it flipped the script and it made it something. As far as the Black Power salute, there's a woman in track and field, an American woman, at the last Olympics. She also gave the Black Power salute on the podium, and she was punished for it, and then they apologized after that. The Olympics are having a very hard time trying to define what is and isn't political, I guess. But yeah, that's a whole thing in itself that she just brought up there.
We have a Zoom question up at top from Abigail Lindo. Thank you for this wonderful talk. I'd love to know more about how you are considering space as you brought it up in relation to innocence. Who was that scholar you referenced again? How do these spaces of athletic performance carry other meanings relative to your work?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. There's, I think we've all experienced places where you're not supposed to bring it, well, of course, I think we got a little lecture about not talking politics at the Thanksgiving dinner table or something like that. But I think that there are other spaces that sort of refute. Okay, I think I should. What was tell me your second question, then maybe someone else wants to help me answer the space question, because that's a really big question.
Did you want me to read it again?
Oh, no. Oh, you want me to read what she said?
I'm not clear. What she said up there is, how do these spaces of athletic performance carry other meanings relative to your work?
Oh, I don't remember what I said. Let me see. I'll find it after. And if anybody wants to know.
Okay.
It's in the article. It's better than.
Jackie?
I mean, in folklore, there's a sort of there's an article that refers to tricksters. And in a way, I think that these people, Kaepernick, a lot of the players, they are like tricksters. They suss things out, and they may have a play ready, or a plan, but if it doesn't work, they can quickly look around and figure out another way to get where they're trying to go, for example, in Kaepernick's case. But back in the medieval times, that, remember that was the day when all the peasants got to be kings and queens and, you know, they took on different high-level rules. Um, this margin of mess was expected on those days, you know. And it's Mary Douglas also talked about that mess is sometimes what you really need to have to write something that's not working correctly in your community or your country or whatever. It doesn't, and usually I think of it as personally my idea of civil disobedience. You know, not, I guess I should say, um, without attacking anyone or anything, right? It's just civil disobedience. And, well, I often thought it would be nice to not pay my taxes, for example, like Thoreau did, but nobody's going to come and get me out of jail. So, yeah.
As you presented these spectacles that were commentary by these athletes, do you see the impact of those statements or the reception of those statements ever being a mix or a mix of the audience's personal responses as well as the audience political responses, as well as the players within the structure of that sports venue, the players and the owners and the fans venue, do you suspect that the response levels are more personal or more political? Or are they equivalents? Because, you know, breaking a pattern or a tradition is different from making like in the case of the knee, it's much different than a political statement. It's
Don't forget the microphone, Dr. Weber.
I don't think you can, I don't think you can really tear them apart completely.
Yeah.
You know, I think your point is, I'm glad you brought that up because I have a good childhood friend who really doesn't like Kaepernick. And he he used to do statistics for the 49ers and also the Bears, the Cal Bears. And so he always says that the reason I put on all the stuff about all the achievements that Kaepernick made was really because of people like him and other people. There's something personal in that. There's something going on that is not, that is intertwined with the political, but it's also, I think it makes the emotion stronger, maybe say it like that. And yeah, I spent more time than I ever thought I would want to do trying to show that Kaepernick and demonstrate that he wasn't he was a good ball player. Even I have statistical stuff now in the chapter. It's just, well, Kaepernick wins, you know, but don't ask me to do that. Break it down for you. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
yeah.
I think, yeah, because
it was nice to be confirmed in your thought, not a separation. But the other thing I think of in the ownership relationship was a loss of a political component of his audience or his supporters or something. And that's more business than politics.
well, people, now, and another thing is people live that political component. We live it, all of us. So when it comes up in a way we don't like, it all of a sudden it does become personal. I read somewhere that if you can make somebody laugh, if they have a different political opinion than you, but if you can make them genuinely laugh, that they're not going to punch you in the nose after that, at least.
So we have time for about one more question.
Back there. I mean, we can still talk, but I just.
Yeah, we certainly be able to talk after we conclude the formal portion.
Thank you. I wondered, going back to the fist in the air and the kneeling, the origin of the kneel. Is there any consideration in your research about Nate Boyle or Boyer, the retired Green Beret, who? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Who
Yes.
who contacted Kaepernick and said, "We kneel for our fallen brethren, as you are for."
I'm glad you brought that up because yes, you can't say everything, but yes, that came up. Two people actually who'd been in the military gave Kaepernick, gave Kaepernick suggestions about what they could do that would be respectful and still get his point across. Say that again? Oh, right. Right.
I'm getting roguish utterances, right? People who spoke out so emotionally against what Kaepernick was doing didn't realize that a white serviceman
Oh, I see.
had urged him to do that in respect.
Well, that it would mean something for somebody, if people feel that they have a community with the military from their serving, they might then be persuaded differently. I mean, it depends on which feeling's the strongest for yeah.
Okay, we'll wrap up the formal part. Thank you, Dr. Weber. And I'm sure she'll stick around to answer any other questions that you might have. Thank you all for coming.